Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, coming to you from Jackson in the state of Tennessee, here in the United States of America. And when you think of the city of Columbus, Ohio, you probably will know that it is home to several great organ players like Hank Marr and Don Patterson. And I tell you, one of the best today is our guest, an innovator of the Hammond B3 organ, a teacher, a businessman, and the leader of a fine session recently released right here. I have it in my hand as Over and Over on his own Chicken Coop Records. Critic Mark Myers in New York City calls this man one of the most exciting Hammond B3 players today, and I think that Mark Myers is right. It's a pleasure for me to welcome to the podcast today Tony Monaco. Tony, thank you for being here, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Anton. God bless you. It's a pleasure is all mine.
I can see that you have a nice setup right there. I believe that's where you normally teach your lessons from.
I teach online, although I have some students that come to my house to study, but my market is the whole world. So I teach right here and don't have to leave the farm.
But besides that, besides the fact that now your market is not just Columbus or just the nearby areas, how do you think that the internet has changed, online teaching and specifically related to music? Because you would think that teaching music would be maybe a little bit more difficult if you're not in person.
Yeah, the internet has brought me the opportunity to be able to reach out and teach, those that I've influenced while being on the road globally. The only difference is you have to really organize yourself, have a lot of supplemental material, and of course, the blessing of having the lesson recorded is actually better than if you went to a live lesson because then you can go back and review the lesson over and over. So it has mostly more advantages than disadvantages.
Yeah, well,
If you know how
definitely.
to teach, that is. That's the key.
Well, I guess that's what I was going to say. The key is the teacher. If you don't know what you're doing, if you're passionate about what you're doing.
I had a great teacher when I was young, in addition to being mentored by Jimmy Smith. And it was because of that teacher that I chose, and I'm really happy that I did, as my career was starting to be on the upswing, 15 years ago. I decided that I wanted to add an educational component because there's not much education about how to play the Hammond organ. And I'm really glad that I did because it fomented an opportunity for me to be able to establish myself as, you know, a teacher of this instrument. And actually, being a teacher of this instrument has allowed me to be a better musician in general because you cannot teach what you don't know.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah, I
been a
think I
blessing.
think it's really interesting because I myself I'm a teacher of Spanish in my case, and I feel like by teaching that language to students here in the United States, I actually get to know a lot more about the language itself and also about English because you have to be aware of both languages when you're teaching a language to Spanish in this case to students who are actually English speakers.
Yeah. And each new time you get an opportunity to do that, you refine your ability to communicate what's necessary for the student to learn, too. So there's a learning curve in delivery, so to speak, right?
I agree with that. And you mentioned that besides having Jimmy Smith as your mentor, you had a really good teacher. And I want to go back into those early years of
Okay.
your life and career, especially because I've read somewhere that you began on the accordion, and then at some point you discovered the organ. How did that happen, Tony?
The first uh, lesson that I took was on the accordion. There was a door to door accordion salesman coming around the neighborhood, and he knocked on the door. And my parents were both immigrants from Italy. So, Italian music was very prevalent in our home. And my father was a drummer who played with a wedding band. So he ended up learning how to play the drums in order to get out of carrying the backpack in the military when he joined the U.S. Army. He was marching the drum while the soldiers did their hikes. So he got into the drums. He loved jazz. And so I used to, when I was a young man, go to his gigs and watch him play, these wedding gigs, going with dad. But when this guy knocked on our door, I fell in love with the accordion and started accordion lessons. So when that was 8 years old, when I was 12, my father's had a quartet wedding band, and they went to try to make a little bit more money. So what the accordion player did was he went out and bought a Farfisa organ, and they decided to let the bass player go so now they could go in trio, make a little bit more money. So I went to the first rehearsal at Mike's house because Mike was the keyboard player and the organ was set up in his practice room. And so at the end of the rehearsal, and I remembered the distinct difference in the sound of that electronic thing rather than the reeds of the accordion. And I was already starting to play a few small gigs with my dad as the drummer at Italian parties. So I was 12 years old already starting to play gigs. And so at the end of the rehearsal, Mike gave me a 2-album set of Jimmy Smith's greatest hits. Evidently, he had gone to the record store when he bought his organ, tried to buy some organ records to listen to. And Jimmy Smith, being the great left-hand bass player that he was, made sense. So he gave me this two-album set of Jimmy Smith's greatest hits, and he told me these exact words. I'll never forget them. He said, "Anthony," he says, "I'm not into this music." He says, "but you should give it a listen. You might like it." So I went up to my bedroom where I had a little record player, that I was playing 45s of the Beatles. And he explained to me that I had to take the adapter off and switch the speed to 33. And the whole side of side one was that song called The Sermon, Jimmy Smith's The Sermon. It was a 22-minute blues. And I fell in love with the organ right then. I knew right then and there that this is what I was going to do the rest of my life. Isn't that interesting?
It really
That's
is,
how
but
I learned the
but
organ.
but, but what was it about the organ that was so attractive to you? Was it the sound? Was it the fact that it was electric, like you said? Was it just you know, the incomparable sound of Jimmy Smith, or maybe all of it together? What was it like? What do you
There
think?
was a couple of variables. One was, back then we didn't have the internet. So the only information that you could see was the album cover. And here was this African American man in a nice red sweater and long fingers. And when you listened to it, there was that electric sound of, I can't describe how beautiful it was. It was so smooth, but yet so exciting. So, and it was a music that I never heard before. It was
Hmm.
like, I knew Italian stuff, I knew rock and roll stuff from listening to Beatles 45s. I never heard jazz. And the first thing I remember after listening to that was learning from my father that, Jimmy Smith was talking to it, that it was a conversation.
Hmm.
So it wasn't just music, but it was a mode of communication.
Hmm.
And so I fell in love with all of those aspects. The fact that it was a unique music to a unique group of people, which I could relate to being Italian. It was a unique sound on an instrument that just mesmerized me. And the fact that I could communicate more than just playing songs. So it was
Hmm.
kind of those three things.
And I feel like in the 60s with Jimmy Smith and a few other organ players, mostly African American players, it's like the sound of the organ changed somehow.
It sure did because, see, Jimmy Smith, what he had done was he was previously a piano player. So a lot of the early organ players were piano players that converted, like Don Patterson was definitely a piano player who lived in Columbus and then he moved to Philly and started playing the organ behind Sonny Stitt.
Hmm.
So uh, the reason for that was the traditional organ style. If you go back a little bit before him, like Wild Bill Davis or Milt Buckner, those
Buddy
class of,
Cole, maybe.
yeah, those organ players, they played pedals with their feet. And Jimmy Smith went ahead and started playing bass with the left hand and the feet together as one bass line.
Mhm.
So you didn't have those chord sustains with melody and roller skating rink kind of sounds, but he utilized the percussive attack of the organ and the fact that you 5 fingers can make more interesting bass lines than 1 foot. And that's why they all sounded different, because quickly this organ became like the the master of rhythm section instruments, because you're playing bass, comp, and lead. It's almost a band in itself. All you
Mhm.
really needed was the drummer, you know.
Mhm.
So any guitar player added or saxophone added was just, on top of the basic rhythm section that it took 3 people to do in a piano trio, right? So you're getting the bass and the comp with one person, which also allows for there to be an integration between ideas and thoughts and harmonic movement,
Mhm.
which is also another advantage. You're the same person. So your harmony is being guided by you. So whatever directions you go in, both your left hand and your right hand are going to follow. So
Does that change the way that you relate to the other musicians in the duo or in the trio? The fact that you have, so to speak, more control over all of that stuff.
yeah, at the beginning, I relied a lot heavier on guitar players to be the harmonic person, because I always use this example when I teach. When you're a child and the bell rings to go out and play, everybody just runs out and plays. That's just the way it goes. And a lot of young musicians, the first thing they're trying to do is learn all the fast notes. You know, that's what I was doing. I heard all them fast notes at Jimmy Smith, so I was trying to play that. I wasn't even paying attention to the music in general, right? And so at the beginning, I relied more heavily on a guitar to lay down the harmony for me, see. But now, I'm at the point where I don't always need a guitar player or want a guitar player. I may want a horn player so that I could dictate all of the harmony. So it's changed over time as I matured as a player.
So it looks to me like Jimmy Smith drew you into the organ, but he also at some point became your mentor. How did that happen, and how important was that for you as a musician?
Wow, that's a great question. So, like I said earlier before, we did not have the internet. We just had the albums to stare at, and if unless you were lucky to go to a concert because they were coming through the region. So I had gone to the local mall and bought every organ record I could find. That's where I was introduced to some other players like Richard Groove Holmes and Jimmy McGriff, because they were popular. Jack McDuff, he was popular. Um, and of course, every Jimmy Smith record. Well, I stumbled across one that was on a label called Mojo Records. And that's why I was so interested in starting my own label later in my career, if we get to that. So I bought this Mojo record, self produced by Jimmy Smith. And in the back of it, it had an address that you could, that of this label. So what I was doing, I was still playing the accordion. Even though I fell in love with the organ, I didn't actually switch over to bringing a B3 live at gigs until I was 16. So from 12 to 16, I was playing an instrument. At the time, it was called a Chordavox. It was an electronic accordion that sounded very much like a B3, that you didn't even have to use the reeds. You could just keep it closed and play the buttons and the notes and run it through a Leslie speaker, and it sounded a lot like a Hammond organ. Actually, the tone generator was manufactured by a company called Lowry. So what I was doing was I started recording cassette tapes and sending love letters and pictures to this address on the back of the record. Little did I know that one night I would get a call, and it was coincidental, but I don't know. Sometimes on my 16th birthday, my father woke me up. It was about 3 or 4 a.m. Must have been right after Jimmy Smith finished playing at his supper club in L.A., he woke me up and said, "You got to come to the phone." So when I got to the phone, there was this raspy voice. And before he even said one word, I knew who it was. Because I had listened. When you're listening intently to learn off of records, you hear everything, right? The grunts behind the licks, something they might have said to the drummer, or something they might have said. And so I knew Jimmy Smith's voice. And it was like God was on the phone. And he said, "Tony Monaco, Jimmy Smith." And I was freaking out. And he told me two things that night. First of all, he was speaking Italian to my father. So he grew up in a neighborhood it was Norristown, which was like a suburb of Philadelphia, where I guess there was a lot of, and this is true because when my father came from Italy, he said the same thing. There was they lived in neighborhoods of mixed cultures. So there was African Americans and Italians and Greeks and Spanish people, probably all in one area. And so Jimmy Smith learned how to speak Italian. So he must have been hanging out with some Italian kids. So he spoke Italian to my dad. And when I got to speaking to him, I was shaken basically inside. He told me two things. He said that I played too many notes, and back to the children going out to the playground, they just run out and play. And the second thing is, he said I needed to learn how to play the right chords.
Mhm.
And those are a lesson that every musician should ever take every day anyhow. To play the notes that make sense to the music, that add to the music, that add to the story, not unnecessary ones. And to learn the right harmony, because to be able to reharmonize means you can dictate what notes to play. So that's still my lesson every day. I try to think about, am I playing the right notes, and am I playing the right chords? So it was a great lesson. It was in a matter of like 5 minutes, a lesson that I still take today. Isn't that crazy?
Now,
That
Jimmy
was my
Smith.
meeting.
Jimmy Smith, I have a record of his right here. This one's called "The Cat," who's
The cat man. Yeah.
who I really love the cover of this album as well as the music inside it. I think on this one he plays with a big band even. But the thing is, I read that he had you out to his club in California. Did you get to play with him much? And if so, what was that experience like of being at that club in California that was either owned or run or operated by Jimmy Smith?
I maintain contact with him, but, not at a regular basis, but a semi-regular basis. And when I turned about 20, um, I spoke to Jimmy Smith, and he had this supper club called the Jimmy Smith Supper Club on Topanga Hills Boulevard in L.A., and he invited me to come out. And so me and my father, of course, my chaperone, we both went to L.A. I was 20, and I got to play one set. And the thing about it was Jimmy Smith and his wife were sitting at a table just on the other side of the organ. So talk about, right there's Jimmy
Stage
Smith.
fright, yeah.
Oh my God! And he liked to drink champagne and orange juice. What do you call 'em? Mimosas?
Hmm.
That's why I think he came out with that song. George Benson wrote that song, Mimosa,
Hmm.
probably because Jimmy liked it. And I don't remember the name of the drummer that night. You'd think I would, but I was so, mesmerized by Jimmy Smith. And he had played the first set. And I just remember him and Lola hanging out. That was his second wife. And he took me into the office, and he had still those pictures that I was sending him, and he showed me the drawer full of cassettes. But one of the most greatest lesson, listen, music can humble you, but the humbling can really make you a better person, a better musician, right? It's not always the opposite way. So when I got done, I was so excited, of course. And I asked the drummer, I said, "How did I do?" Because I was really nervous. He said, "You're great. You got a lot of fire." He says, "But you're real repetitive."
Hmm.
So what a great lesson to learn from a drummer who plays with Jimmy Smith. What I had good for me going and what I needed to work on. So then that was telling me that, I needed to learn a wider, variety of tunes, styles, and the way I played rather than always trying to play those fast notes like the kids out on the playground.
Did you
Changed my
stay? Did you
perspective.
stay in California for a while
Yeah, we
with Jimmy?
hung
Or
out for just a couple days.
Mhm.
Then it was time to get back to home, because Dad had a big construction company that he was running here. So my experience of hanging out with Jimmy was very limited, but
Mhm.
the experiences that I had were very heavy.
Hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. And when you think of a jazz scene, you think of places like New York and California. You think of Chicago, maybe definitely New Orleans, Louisiana. But what was the jazz scene like in Columbus, Ohio, that you remember from those early years?
Well, that's kind of really where I learned how to play because, the Chitlin circuit extended out of those places and went, you know. So the Midwest, that's probably why Don Patterson, Hank Marr, and we had another one that was on Blue Note Records named Bobby Pierce. He's still alive
Hmm.
and lives in
Hmm.
L.A. Um, those three were products of the Chitlin circuit coming through Columbus, and so Columbus had a reputation. We had Rusty Bryant, we had Hank Marr. They were putting out records. Nancy Wilson. So what happened with the Chitlin circuit was it was sort of like adopted all these different communities. You go to Cleveland, there was somebody there that played really good or more. And you go to Detroit, and there was another gang. What was the guy's name? Johnny Hammond Smith was a
Oh
great organ
yeah,
player
absolutely.
out of Detroit.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of these organ players. So I ended up starting to play gigs and fill in gigs for these people. Like they would call me when they couldn't play the gig. And so I would go play with the local greatest drummer of the time and guitar player or horn player. And, that's where I really learned how to play, because also not only did I play, but every time there was an opportunity to go to jam sessions or listen to them, I was indoctrinated into the music by going to watch them too. So, you know, I try to tell all of the students, especially those in Europe and abroad, that we don't learn the music by reading books. We don't learn it by giving ideas. We learn it by listening.
Mm.
That's how you have to learn. So it doesn't really matter where you come from. It matters how much you listen and practice and try to adopt to the music that you're trying to emulate.
Same thing with the language, Tony. You don't learn Spanish in a book. You have to actually go to the place, talk to the people, and communicate. So that really resonates with me when you mention that because it's very similar.
It's the same way, right? Exactly.
Now, I hear your family had different types of businesses, and one of them was an Italian restaurant. How important was that to you in your formative years to be around, a family that owned an Italian restaurant and being in contact with people, maybe playing at the restaurant? What was that like?
Well, my father, when he came over from Italy and finally settled, he started a concrete construction business. And my brother and sister also were really talented. And we had a band called the Monaco Family. So we would go and perform at shows or weddings or parties. We were kind of well known in Columbus as a family band. So what happened was my father kind of wanted to, when you come from the old country, you want to try to go up. It's a natural thing. So he decided that he would like to try to open up a restaurant, incorporate my mother's fine Italian original cuisine from Abruzzo, and put the family together to perform. And so he bought this place and rebuilt, since he was into construction, made it beautiful. It was called Monaco's Palace. So here I was approaching 21 years old, and um, all of a sudden I'm kind of one of the managers. When you're a family, you do everybody works all the time. So I was like the one of the managers, and I played every night, in the lounge, and then on the weekends, because my brother and sister were still in high school, they would come and play on the weekends, and we built a business around, uh, our performing, my mom's recipes, and of course my father had a lot of charm, so it worked. It was a wonderful situation.
How did that experience of playing there, help you when you later became a professional musician? Is there any impact in that?
Yeah, I mean, when you're playing every night, you learn the how to keep going even when it's kind of like mundane. When the repetitiveness. I learned how to keep it exciting even when it wasn't exciting, so to speak. Plus, you also learn how to take the hits. Because it's not always busy every night.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it was a wonderful experience. And I got to hire anybody I wanted to play. So during the week, I'd hire all the great jazz musicians. So I kept growing as a jazz musician.
Hmm.
That was always my main passion, was learning how to play and perform jazz. Even though when the family band did the thing on the weekends, it'd be more showy, more contemporary tunes, top 40, whatever to entertain, right? So one of the things that I really learned from that experience was how to really home in on my entertainment
Hmm.
skills.
Hmm.
Because it's not always just about playing, but it's about bringing the audience in and being a part of, and that's the entertaining part. I think that's what a lot of people miss in their careers to become a better musician, and it's how you can communicate, that's putting the sizzle on the steak,
Hmm.
And I learned how to entertain. That's what I do. I'm an entertainer, that plays jazz,
Hmm. You mentioned before also that at some point started your own record label, and that reminds me that you do have a background in business because of your family. How does that background, or how did that background in business help you in the music world?
Well, I one of the things that I definitely had in my to dos was I wanted to graduate college because my father had to abandon his school when he was in second grade. The war went right through his town, and that was the end of the education. So I wanted to get my college degree just to once again, push forward a better life. So I started having children. I have, from my first marriage, I have 3 grown-up daughters now with 7 granddaughters. So I graduated from a private business school called Franklin University. So I model my work around a business model, you know. And when you're looking at a business model, it requires marketing, requires advertising, and to know the difference between both of those. A lot of people don't know that there's a difference. There is a big difference between the strategy of marketing things and then using advertisement to market with, you know. Plus, I'm very good because when you're in a restaurant business, man, profit and loss is a fine line. So I run my business with that in mind as well, trying to increase the profit center, so to speak, and also eliminate, the things that take a lot of cost that don't produce. So I run my whole business today with a business model. I like to say I'm successful because the lights are still on.
Hmm. At what point, Tony, did you make the decision to actually concentrate on music as a profession, and leave, so to speak, the business world that did not include music? Because obviously you mentioned that music can and actually is a business, but you did concentrate at some point on music. How did you make that decision? Was it a tough decision for you to make?
That's a good question, and if it's okay, I'll answer it in full. Um, I needed to make more money, and being in a restaurant business and 5 people pulling from it, there was a limited amount of income. So I got the blessing and opportunity to leave the company and become a salesman for a food distributor. So for a couple of years, I worked for a company called Cisco Foods, and I really learned, the skills of making the sale. Because to be in business, you also got to have a sales force. Because if you're not selling, you're gonna go down. You got to sell. So I learned that. But then my father had a big construction business that was still going on, and he needed somebody to help him run that. So as my children started to grow, I needed to make even more money to start getting them prepared and save money for college. So I ended up going to run my father's business. And I had lost the dream that music was going to be a career for me. I played gigs here and there, made side money, did whatever I needed to do. But I kind of let music have to be the second because I needed to raise a family, so I did. So what happened was is my father in 1999 he passed away from lung cancer. And my brother and I were both pretty much running. And at that point in time, we were the owners of this construction business. So that was my main focus. But 6 months after my father died, I got a call from a friend of mine that said, there's this new club that's opening up. And he said, Joey DeFrancesco's coming to be the opening act. I didn't know much about Joey DeFrancesco. I had stopped buying Jimmy Smith records long ago, you know. And when I went out and played gigs, I usually played, with two synthesizers I made them sound like an organ, It was
Hmm.
kind of what happened in the late 70s. The organ kind of faded a little bit. And come along this young man named Joey DeFrancesco that brought it back. So I offered the guy, I said, Joey's coming and he's an organ player and he's Italian. What? Maybe I'll take him over to my mom's house for dinner. Is that okay? And he said, great. He says, we've got to feed those guys, meals as part of the contract. So when I went to pick up Joey, he was given a clinic at this career center. And it was just him and the drummer. And when I walked in, I'd gone home after starting the jobs, construction business, a whole different animal. That's where I really learned how to manage people, because the blue collar industry is a lot different than white collar industry. It takes a lot of motivation to get people to do things, and I learned those skills, to stay successful in that. So I went home and I took a shower, and I went to this career center to pick Joey up, and I walked in while he was talking and everything, and somebody in the audience said, Joey, there's Tony Monaco. He said, oh, hey, that's the guy that's taking us out to dinner. And the other guy says, no, you don't know. He plays the organ. And Joey says, well, how come you didn't tell me that? I said, well, I wasn't prime at that time, right? You know where my head was at. And Joey said, well, come up and play. And that's what happened. So I went to play, and all of a sudden I look at Joey. His eyes are wide open. And on the drive home to my mom's house, because my mom cooked him a beautiful Italian dinner, him and the whole band, he said, boy, you really got a lot of talent. He says, I'd like to be able to produce you. Would that be okay? I said, sure. So next thing you know, I'm in Phoenix, where he lived, in a studio, and I recorded my first release, Burning Grooves. I had not even, considered being in the music career. It was sort of like destiny, like maybe God said, okay, now it's your turn. And here I am. I've got 14 records, 13 records out, and I do everything music. I went full-time musician in the year 2006 because I still ran a construction business and played and recorded. I did them both. But I was in my 40s. You can do stuff like that when you're a little younger, You can't put all in all, but you can do it, But what happened in 2006 was when, everybody talks about 2008, the big crash. The crash preceded by the homeowners, lenders, over mortgaging and the whole. So my industry, the construction industry, crashed towards the end of 2006. And it was at that time that I applied all the business knowledge that I had to make music be my income, and I've never had to go back. So it's been almost 20 years now. So that's pretty good in itself,
Yeah, absolutely. And when you mentioned Joey DeFrancesco, I was thinking that you were mentioning that uh, towards the late 70s, early 80s, the organ sort of faded a little bit for different reasons that we could go into. But um, Why do you think the organ came back like that in, let's say, the 90s, with musicians like Joey DeFrancesco? Was there some sort of change in the sound of the organ? Was it just, were there just a lot of different people that just began to take it up? I've always wondered why that happened, and I don't think I have an answer for that.
We can speculate, I suppose. One of the things that I think, because I've thought a lot about this, was maybe even the genre itself got tired a little bit, right? Because I'd buy albums and everybody recorded what's going on. And everybody was playing Let's Stay Together because they were trying to play the contemporary music to keep this old antique instrument alive. And I think it just died for a couple of reasons. Probably the fact that it was hard to carry these things around. Maybe some of the players kind of got tired of the genre. And maybe the audience did too. I don't know. But I think what made Joey DeFrancesco so exciting was here was this young, good looking guy who was very excited about it,
Hmm.
playing the Jesus out of it, right? Making the organ exciting again, and not even playing the contemporary music. He was playing at the beginning all the old swing tunes that had died already. The American songbook. I think it was just the world was ready for the organ again, and it came back with a vengeance. You
Mhm.
know, and now today, because of these replicas that they're able to make, when you think about the organ, it was the first synthesizer invented by Lawrence Hammond in 1935 to synthesize a pipe organ. It wasn't meant to be played in jazz clubs and blues clubs. Maybe gospel churches. Maybe that was the uh, birth of why this thing got out to become a jazz instrument, because maybe they started carrying them out of the church, taking them into the clubs, right? Playing blues, playing jazz. But when you think about how Joey came back, then all of a sudden you started seeing all the others come back. Dr. Lonnie Smith made a
Mhm.
serious comeback
Mhm.
as he actually, that's when he transformed into Dr. Lonnie Smith, was after the Joey revolution.
Mhm.
And then you think about Larry Goldings and the way it started to really come back. So he laid out, and then that new birth laid out a path for me to follow, and it's still going.
Mhm.
It's still going. And that's why on this album I recorded all original tunes,
Mhm.
because I don't want to get tired. I want to keep the music fresh and moving forward. So this is my concept of where I think the organ should be going in one direction. Of course, you've got others like Corey Henry that have excited it in the gospel world.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of wonderful things happening with the organ today.
It's interesting because even before I heard all those classic albums by Jimmy Smith and Groove Holmes and all the others that we've mentioned, Hammond Smith and many of them, the first person I ever heard play the Hammond B3 organ was a British guy by the name of Georgie Fame. And he had a version of Things Ain't They Used to Be by Duke Ellington on an album called The Two Faces of Fame. And I just loved the sound of it. And so I started looking for other records. And of course, then is, when I found this incredible tradition of players like the ones we've mentioned. And that first album that you mentioned, Burning Grooves, that you recorded with, or that was produced by Joey DeFrancesco, really is one of my favorites. But it's only one in a long series of albums that you've recorded, and this is the latest one in that series, an album called Over and Over. And of course, I want to spend some time talking about this album. You mentioned a little bit just a few seconds ago about the fact that you wanted to record all originals, songs, tunes that you find that are exciting to you, that you think could be attractive to the audience. But how did this project to record over and over come together originally?
A couple of years ago, I released I think they're saying that this is my 13th released record. I lost count. I don't do them for the count. I do them because it's time to put out another record, you know. But I had another one that I put out a couple of years ago called Four Brothers. And that concept was to take an homage to Don Patterson because he had an album out called Brothers 4.
Hmm.
So I came out with four brothers and included uh, 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 three other musicians from Columbus to produce this Four Brothers record. I always try to record at least one or two original songs on my records because I like to write songs. I don't do it because I write. I write because they come to you and then you start playing it and it's like, oh, okay, this is cool, you know. So, uh, but I've always included covers as well, you know. And when you include covers, you give people something else to compare it to, you know? Where my concept on this one was what about if I just want to create songs that I want to play with the harmony that I've developed over time, the right chords, so to speak, that Jimmy Smith said, and put together a project that's all original. So that's how this came about. The only song that was pre written before I decided to record this project was Over and Over, the middle track, which is the feature track. And that track came, see, you know, like I said, writing tunes comes in waves. You know, you all of a sudden get them, you know, and then you go dry for a while, and then you get some new inspiration. I had gotten a text from a scammer, and the text was trying to cancel their yoga appointment, but I could see that the area code. I wasn't hip yet to how scammers work, and so they were trying to cancel their yoga appointment. So I was trying to be kind, and I texted this person back, and I said, you know, you're, I'm not your yoga instructor. I just want you to know maybe you need to check your number, you know. But it was a different area code, you know. Well, come to find out, this person was persistent, sending me pictures. This, you know, pretty lady from Asia, you know, who lived in so-called California, and her aunt lived in Singapore, and she was into Bitcoin. And if I could trade on this one Monday night, I was going to make a lot of money. So I played with it for a while, you know, because I figured out it was a scammer,
Hmm.
you know. So she was doing everything, God bless her, or it, or I don't, who knows who it is. You just get pictures, so you don't really know who you're talking to. Uh, she got me all the way to the day when it was time to buy the Bitcoin, and then I said, "Well, I'm so sorry. I'm a musician. I don't have any money." She went away, or it went away, you know. But but she was so persistent over and over and over again to get me to buy these Bitcoin. So in one of the funny things that I did to to get this person riled up too more, because actually I was playing it, you know, just because. Why not, you know? Why not? I wrote that song over and over because I wanted to record it, and I actually signed up a DistroKid account, and I put it up in there, but it was an electronic version. It's nothing like the one on the album. I
Hmm.
was playing around with some electronic music. So that song, so if you go and look up Over and Over, you'll find an electronic version. So I sent it to this person, you know, and they were all excited and everything, and we're going to trade, you know, and then I've told her I don't have any money, you know. So but then my mother got cancer, and she died in August. So I recorded this record 2 weeks before my mother passed. That's why the only dedication on this one is to my mother, because I've done a lot of them and dedicated to all my families and everything, but this was special. So about a month before I decided to record it, I wanted to get this band together. Reggie Jackson, who's a very powerful, funky drummer. He's powerful, and I've known him a long time. And this Zakk Jones is an upcoming youngster who really can play. You know, when I say youngster, he's now the jazz instructor at Capital University, so he's not that young. He's graduated and his master's in music, but he's in his 30s, I would assume, or maybe close to 40. You know, so I wanted to get those two together because Zakk had a nice, open concept to playing that was not just traditional jazz, but a little bit more. I don't know. What do you hear when you hear him? A little John Scofield, a
Mm-hmm.
little, yeah, something like that maybe. And Reggie, of course, he's incredible. And so I wanted to put them together, and then within about a week, I wrote all these songs. So it was time. It came out, and I wrote the songs. I like to record in my own home because today you can do that. I got really good recording gear, and I have a way to isolate everything just like a big studio.
Mm-hmm.
Because my other passion, I don't know if you saw, but I mixed and mastered this myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I like doing that too, because I've been fooling around with recording stuff. So this record was inspired about a month before I recorded it, and I wrote 6 of the 7 tunes that month before we recorded it. I sent it. I played some rough tracks on the organ and recorded them and sent them to Reggie and Zakk. They came well prepared, as you could see.
Mm-hmm.
Zakk really surprised me. He really knew the melodies and the harmonies. Sounded like we played these songs forever,
Mm-hmm.
right? And of course, Reggie, I like to say that my rhythmic sense on playing the organ, since I'm a rhythm sections player, comes from all the great drummers that I played with, because you got to play bass with them, and so you get a chance to lock with different drummers, and I felt Reggie would be the most powerful for this one. So
And I was going to say that Zakk Jones's guitar does have a certain funkiness to it that's very attractive, I think, and I think it works really well within the concept of this album.
thanks. Yeah, that's what I think too. I agree with you on that.
Now, I'm sure that each one of the songs has, or which one of the tunes has its own story, but I'm more interested in the creative process. Like, how do you compose a song? What happens when you are writing this music? Because you do say that you wrote these songs fairly quickly, or at least in the space of not a long time. And I was just wondering how it happens, how you come up with these tracks, and if there's any sort of method that you follow, or you just kind of let it go as it happens.
Well, if you have time, I'll just kind of briefly go through them. Remember that, like, sometimes when you write a song, it writes you. You just wake up and that song is there. So once I had decided to record this project, my radar was, you know, ready, because I didn't know what the record was going to be. I just decided to get a recording date, set it down, and we're going to do it, guys, kind of thing. So, the Daddy, the first track, I was teaching a student a song called Stanley Turrentine's Sugar. And I was explaining to him that Bobby Pierce, the guy that I mentioned earlier, who's a great organ player who now is retired and lives in L.A., he showed me some alternate changes to it. So I ended up taking the Sugar A section, because there's no bridge to Sugar. I ended up playing around with the A section, and it ended up becoming an AAB song. So it ended up having a bridge, which Sugar doesn't. But the Sugar song goes. That's Sugar, Then here's the alternate changes. So that song just came out like that. And then the bridge was no brainer. you'd never guess it was Sugar, but it's just using the changes, So a lot
Hmm.
of songs in jazz are what they call contrafacts. So the Daddy, being a funky tune, it's catchy too. A lot of
Hmm.
people like that. That's why I put it on track one. Obviously I'm hoping that maybe Sirius or XM likes it, by putting it on track one. Maybe it'll get some airplay. That's
Hmm.
my only hope,
And,
right?
and that's Stanley Turrentine from the 70s from CTI Records, I think.
Yeah, and he played a lot with Jimmy Smith. So you'll see the family resemblance there. But you would never guess that was Sugar unless I said it. But I like to be honest about where my motivations are coming
Hmm.
from because it doesn't really sound anything like Sugar. How many songs are written that these chord changes have been used in some respect, some way
Hmm.
else on another song? Come to find out that over and over again, the song that I wrote to please this scammer, the first few measures of it is "Suit and Tie Guy" by Justin Timberlake.
No.
How would I have ever guessed? But it kind of sounds like that at the beginning.
Hmm.
I didn't try to make it sound like that, but somewhere along the line I might have heard that song and it stuck in there.
Hmm.
One for Pat, the second track, I definitely tried to formulate that uh, like me and Pat would play because I played with him for almost 3
And I have a
years.
record of his here, Pat Martino,
Okay, El
who's
Hombro, that's my favorite,
was
man.
really one of my favorite guitar players. I love people like Grant Green and Wes Montgomery, but Pat Martino is not as well known, and he's really one of my favorites. This is an album from, I believe, Prestige Records, El Hombre. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Joe Fields, and the organ player Trudy Pitts was one of Philadelphia's finest female organ players,
Hmm.
and she really plays great on that record. I
Yeah.
love El
There's the
Hombre.
lineup right there.
There it is, Trudy Pitts, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she actually played the organ for Jimmy Smith's funeral when he died.
Oh.
We're all like family. I got to meet all of these people thanks to Pat and touring. So one for Pat was written kind of in the dedication to what Pat would have liked. He
Hmm.
liked those kind of catchy things like he liked blues that didn't sound like blues, right?
Hmm.
That kind of
Hmm.
thing. So it was written like how me and Pat used to like to play. We did a record together. I don't know if you ever heard this record. It was called Undeniable.
No, I don't
We
think I've heard that
recorded
one.
we recorded it in Blues Alley.
Hmm.
Jeff Tain Watts on the drums, me on the organ, Eric Alexander on the sax. There's a song on there that's not exactly like this, but kind of we go into those tritones. There's a lot that little sound,
Hmm.
that I used in One for Pat. That was something I learned from playing with Pat. So that's
It's
where
it's
that
it's
song.
blues with kind of like a Lilton swing kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and some hits, that aren't just let's just play 12 bar blues. It's still 12 bar, but it's got some hits in there.
Hmm.
So it's kind of cool. That My Little Rosie, the third track, I had a little cat and she passed away. But when she was alive, she was really cute little kitty. So I wrote My Little Rosie Girl for her way before the record. So that one was written, you know, uh, before. So I just refreshed myself on the tune. Because
Hmm.
sometimes you'll write a song or you'll play something and then if it's not registered, it's forgotten.
Hmm.
So, but I had written that cat for a cat. So um, that was kind of cool. And then of course we talked about over and over. The Ready Set Go. Uh, One time at a NAMM show when me and Joey were both representing Hammond, we were talking about what's your favorite Jimmy Smith record, and Joey told me that his favorite Jimmy Smith record was The Boss.
Mm.
Uh, if you listen to that live recording of Jimmy Smith playing The Boss,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, why did you dig that record so much? He said, man, Jimmy Smith played everything on that record. So Ready Set Go is a homage to, you know, kind of, you
Mm-hmm.
know, there's your Jimmy Smith one, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and on
Mm-hmm.
and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a D minor blues with the changes that Jimmy Smith used in The Boss. So Ready, Set, Go, played it a little bit faster, you know, and really stretched it out so that, we could push ourselves to the limit and get, sometimes when you can put everybody on the limit, magical things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Reggie just really tears it up on his solos there. And Zakk did a really great job, too. So, Ready, Set, Go was that. What was it? Oh, Sailboat. So I always like those songs that have descending changes, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, no. I like those
Mm-hmm.
sexy songs that go downwards, a man and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Or I recorded once another song called My Little Boat. So it's kind of got those really pretty descending changes. And it reminds me of the nostalgia of when we used to go see our grandparents in Italy, because my dad would shut his construction business down when we were children, and we'd go back to see Grandma and Grandpa for Christmas because that's where they lived. So they would always be playing those kind of songs on the airplane, maybe to keep you relaxed before you fly 8 hours. So, that's where I thought this one. It feels
Mm-hmm.
like an airline song. Kind of that,
Mm-hmm.
kind of Latin, kind of Joe Beam.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites really on the album because of that Latin beat that you put in there. And I listened to the record, no pun intended, over and over and over again when I got it, preparing the interview, and I kept listening to that track and I kept thinking, this sounds somewhat familiar to me, and I kept thinking about it and thinking about it, and then I came to the conclusion that it does remind me a little bit of Everything Happens to Me by Matt Dennis and Tom Adair that Sinatra used to sing with Tommy Dorsey, and it was probably not a conscious inspiration, but it's if you slow it down, it kind of sounds like that kind of groove, that kind of track.
There you go. So that might have been how it came into my crawl. So I woke up one morning and I had that song, there, listen, I got this new one. And what I told Reggie, if you notice on both My Little Rosie and this one, don't play the bossa nova beat.
Hmm.
Everybody knows that one to death. So one of his job was don't make it sound like that. Try to make them sound Latiny but different.
Hmm.
So I thought he did a real good job in making these kind of have like they don't just sound Latiny, but they sound contemporary.
That's true, and that kind of reminds me a little bit of what you were mentioning before about Jimmy Smith, how he played the blues, but not the traditional way, and you're trying to do the same with the Latin, kind of sound.
Exactly.
Hmm.
I didn't want it to sound like two bossa novas on the project, but I love Latin feel.
Hmm.
The only thing I didn't do was a samba feel,
Hmm.
but um, you know, um, that was my interpretation of those kind of changes.
Hmm.
And then finally, last but not least, Uprooted is
Hmm.
a contrafact. Not really. It's got its own, but G blues is G blues. So a lot of those funks are blues tunes, and this is like how Root Down, Jimmy Smith,
Hmm.
obviously, he goes up. That's why I went different
Hmm.
tempo, different arrangement. Where the Root Down blues is more like a 16 bar. This is a 12 bar, but it still has that exciting ascending
Hmm.
like lift that. And I like on those funky tunes to let the drummer have it at the end,
Hmm.
just to go for it, because usually you hear solos in trades, but you never really hear the drummer get a chance. So that's why on Over and Over and Uprooted at the end of the tune, I give Reggie some space to say some stuff before we cap it off. So
Hmm.
so that's the album.
Yeah, I do appreciate you running through the tracks because it makes now it's going to make the listening experience even more interesting to me, knowing where the tunes come from and what you were thinking or how you were inspired to do it. It's interesting to me that there doesn't seem to be necessarily an overarching concept behind this album, but you did get some tracks that work really well together.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I got lucky maybe.
Now
It's
you
an honor
you
to play.
it really is an honor for me to get a chance to sit down and chat with you and in winding down the conversation. I wanted to ask you about your experience playing live. You've played live jazz not just in the United States but also in different parts of the world, and I wonder if you feel like also you've been teaching, people from different parts of the world. Is jazz received in a different way overseas than it is here in the United States, in any way that you have noticed, or is it mostly the same? Just the geography changes.
uh, One of the things that I really have noticed was when you think about blues and you think about jazz's its origin. It was created by a population that was oppressed. And so, therefore, jazz and blues became a form of language and expression to. That's why probably it got so good by some of the great stars of the past, John Coltrane's, the Jimmy Smiths, the go down the list. So I find that jazz is mostly perceived very strongly in countries that are not so well to do.
Mhm.
Even though it's received by the sophisticated cultures, let's drink some champagne and eat caviar because it's cool to be jazz. But when I'm getting the blessing again in May to travel to Indonesia. It'll be like my 14th time in a row. You talking about a population that's third world country. Man, there are some killing jazz musicians over there.
Mhm.
Because that's all they got to do. They pick up an instrument and they play, play, play. Because that's all they got. They don't got all the distractions of internet and wealth, but they have their instrument and they practice. So it's perceived in those places like I did another gig once in Croatia, similar situation where the drummers that were coming out of there were stupid great, just incredible. So I find that in those countries, jazz is appreciated a little differently than, but in general, I
Mhm.
think it's an American music, and when we go, it's one of the authentic things that we Americans can present, and it's respected for that. So I've always found that the audiences that I perform really love the music that we play. And it's refreshing to them too, you know? Cuz to hear real jazz live, as you well know, is a lot different than listening to it on the radio,
Hmm.
you know.
Have
It's
you
exciting, you know.
throughout your career of many decades now, have you seen the role of jazz change here in the United States?
That's a sad but true question. I say that because it has changed in the form of the pure jazz that we like,
Hmm.
the straight ahead jazz. I think the new jazz way, which is very popular, and for the right term as expressed to me by those who perform it, they call it contemporary
Hmm.
jazz.
Hmm.
Um, that industry is doing very well. Why? Well, because you don't have to really think too much to enjoy it. You just tap your feet and dance. It's kind of a groove music without big. As a matter of fact, I tried to get a radio promoter to pick this up, and he says, "Man, this is as close as you're going to get to contemporary jazz." He says, "But it's the solos take it away from the contemporary jazz because it requires you to have to go down another journey
Hmm.
that the contemporary jazz market doesn't take you down. So right now I don't know how to say it because my only uh, perspective would be from Columbus.
Hmm.
People still enjoy it when they finally get to hear it. It's promoting it that's the hard part, I
Hmm.
think. It's a small market right now. When the number one jazz record being played gets 250 hits in a week to be number one, that kind of tells you everything, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
250 plays will make a record number one. Well, geez, they wouldn't even pick you up if it was contemporary, if it's not getting millions of plays, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So, but it's a treasured market, and we're going to continue to build it and keep it going because I don't think jazz is ever going to die.
Hmm.
And as a matter of fact, thank God to the internet, there's some youngsters coming up with some pretty good chops. And I think with a little mentorship, this music will always find a way. But it blends itself. Like, you know, remember, even though might not be a big straight ahead jazz uh, uh, community, now there's a kind of a hip hop jazz community. I don't know if you've noticed, there's these
Hmm.
different little
Hmm.
fragments that are still improvised music, not just the contemporary jazz, but Latino jazz. Look at that.
Hmm.
So when you take those little pockets, I think jazz has spread out, and it's just, it's not going to be what it used to be. It's going to be what it does in its spreading through the communities that want it, and need the music for survival, so to speak. So
Well, Tony, but before I let you go, I do have a couple of very, very quick questions. One of them has to do with your teaching. You teach from your home. You've also, taught at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. What is that experience as an educator like for you? And what ways does teaching somehow impact your music? So, how does your role as a teacher impact upon you as a player?
I really feel like this record is, I'm not getting any younger, so my chops aren't getting any faster. As a matter of fact, I don't want to play all them notes anymore. Uh, as a teacher, I've been able to refine my skill because I get a chance to work with people and show them and teach them. And I've had to change my delivery in order to get them to understand and learn. Because this is a difficult instrument. This is not just, this is something else. You're playing bass, you're playing comp. But it's really changed my playing the more I've taught. Because now I've learned to refine my skill, so to speak. So I think one of the things that you and I can agree to on this record, I'm definitely not overplaying it. I'm trying to play the part as it needs to be, not all over the place. Like, look at me, look at me, look at me, but more um, as a band member of a team that's going to go out and win the soccer game kind of
Hmm.
thing,
Is,
you
is
know.
is that a realization, Tony, that comes with age and experience, would you say?
I think so. I think when we're young, we got something to prove. When we're older, we got something to hold on to, and we appreciate the moment, maybe. I know I appreciate the moments that I get to play. So,
And you mentioned you're going to be traveling to Indonesia. What other projects are you working on at the moment, or what is the future, holding for Tony Monaco?
my goal right now is I think it's time. The pandemic allowed me some time to put together an online school. So, I also have an online subscription based school. So right now, I'm trying to increase some of the video content in the online school and release some that are not in the school that people can go to my website and purchase. Those are the things that are my silent investors, angel investors, so to speak. So I'm right now working on educational things. I've got a lot of nice tours that I've played already this year, but I don't like to tour for weeks and weeks at a time now. I like to go, play a couple good dates, make a little bit of money, come back home, teach, go. So I'm going to be going to Oregon in a couple of weeks to play some nice concert with some great musicians. Then I'm going to go to Texas, and then I'm going to go to Indonesia. Then in the summer, I've got a few things planned, but I try not to keep my schedule busy with just being out there playing. I like home, and I like family, and I like stability. I like to wake up in the morning knowing I could drink coffee, have a schedule, play the organ, teach people, you know. So that's kind of what it is. I do want to put some more records out again. My next record that I'm floating around a couple concepts, so we'll just leave it at that, okay? One concept is to make a big band record, but only with an organ trio. Like, the organ is really a big band instrument when you think
Hmm.
about it. You
Hmm.
pull all the stops, it's like the band standing up. So maybe instead of going along the funky blues Latin route, maybe I'll go with writing a bunch of newer standards that are swing tunes, and see if I can introduce. I have a couple of friends of mine that I like to play from Colorado. Steve Kovalchek, who's a great guitarist, and Jim White, who's a drummer, that teach at Greeley in near Denver. I kind of like to use those two guys and do a big band record with just an organ trio. That's one concept. Another concept, though, is I'm thinking about maybe trying to release a contemporary jazz project. I'm going to have to do a lot of listening and find out how to cut out all the unnecessaries because like we talked about. But hey, why not, right? I mean, if it's a market that allows me to introduce my music to a different market, if I can do it authentically, why not? I'm still growing
Absolutely.
as a musician. Doesn't have to be one thing or another. So,
Those are two interesting projects, and I really would be interested in, particularly in that big band album that you're talking about with the trio.
well, man, when you listen to Jack McDuff and you listen to the early Jimmy McGriff, and those guys were trying to play uh, orchestral music on the organ.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of the kids today think of the organ as just one sound on the top and one sound on the bottom. They're not using the whole instrument as it's
Hmm.
been designed. I
Hmm.
like to try to do that, make a like write all new original tunes, once again. And I've recorded some swing tunes already that could be maybe replayed. Like I'll remember Jimmy, which was one I wrote for Jimmy when he passed away, and Ali Olio, which is a spoof on rhythm changes. Those could be done big band way, but I'm thinking even more along the lines of tunes like reminiscing on tunes like Shiny Stockings. What's the other April in Paris?
Hmm. Hmm.
Nice orchestral tunes, but make new ones. Not do those, but make new ones. So it's going to take some inspiration to do it because those are sophisticated tunes. So, but I think I can do it. So.
Well,
I want to say thank you very much for your opportunity, Anton. It's wonderful.
Well, I thank you because it's really been a pleasure to be able to sit down with you for over an hour and chat about music, about the Hammond B3 organ, and about this album, which was the excuse really to have you on the show today. Tony Monaco Trio, Over and Over, and this is an album of all original tunes. And since you teach, Tony, since this album is available in different places, tell us where people can find more information about you, about your classes, about your projects, about your records, because I'm sure the people out there would be interested in maybe getting in touch with you.
Oh, that'd be wonderful, and thanks for that opportunity. Just go to my website, B3, the number, B, the letter, Monaco, Monaco, B3Monaco.com. I've got all the information up there on how you can buy a record autograph from me, obviously. I even have play alongs for this, so if you want to play along, I have them where you can download the play alongs. I also have the information on my online school and the information obviously on my online lesson. So basically, that'd be the right place to go. B3Monaco.com. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's been a pleasure to have you on the Jazz Flashes podcast. Today, I'd like to take the opportunity to recommend this album and any other albums that you may find out there by Tony Monaco in different formations, but particularly on a trio setting like this. It's absolutely fine music, and I know you will enjoy it. So, Over and Over on Chicken Coop Records just came out a few weeks ago, and it's definitely a most recommendable album that I've been enjoying ever since it came out. Thank you, Tony. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope to be able to talk to you again in the future when you have any other projects to share with me and with the audience.
It'd be my honor. Thank you, and God bless you, Anton.
Thank you. Take care.
You too, sir.
This has been a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast with our guest, Tony Monaco, joining us from Columbus, Ohio. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez from Jackson, Tennessee, and I would like to take the opportunity to recommend Tony's new album, Over and Over. Just came out on Chicken Coop Records, a fantastic trio album with Tony playing the Hammond B3 organ. You will enjoy it for sure if you love good jazz music. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation, and I will see you again when we record a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez. Mine and Tony Monaco's is the copyright of this conversation, which was recorded on this April morning in the year of 2024. And very soon you'll be able to watch it and to listen to it on my YouTube channel, Anton GF, as part of the Jazz Flashes podcast. It has been my pleasure. Make sure that you listen to Over and Over or any other album by Tony Monaco and look him up online, and I'm sure that you will absolutely love his music. Thank you, and goodbye, everybody.